18 years. That's how long I poured my soul into that company. I was there before there was even a sign on the door. Back then, it was just three of us in a dream, cramped into a dusty little office above a rundown coffee shop that always smelled like burnt toast. We had no money, barely any clients, and more debt than confidence. But we had ideas. We had grit. And I had something they didn't. I had loyalty. I believed in what we were trying to build. So I stayed late, came in early, skipped holidays, and said goodbye to weekends. I gave that place my best years, my best thinking, and my best health. I helped design the first logo, build the first pitch deck, close the first $1 million client. I didn't just work for that company, I built it. I trained their first employees. I wrote the policies when we couldn't afford lawyers. I was the one who talked angry clients down at 2 a.m. I kept the place from falling apart when the CEO had his first panic attack before a board meeting. When our servers crashed the night before product launch, I drove 2 hours to fix them myself because no one else knew how. I even saved the founder's marriage on C didn't ask me how, but I did it. So you'd think that kind of loyalty mattered. You'd think 18 years earned you something, respect, trust, a proper goodbye. But no. One Tuesday afternoon, I got an email. No subject line. Just, please come to the conference room at 3 p.m. I knew something was off. The air felt different that day. The intern wouldn't make eye contact. My access card stopped working in the upstairs lounge. At 2:59, I walked into a room that I helped furnish, literally. I picked the chair stand, saw 3 people sitting there. One was the new CFO, who had only been there 6 months. One was a junior HR rep I didn't even know by name. And the last was the CEO, who looked like he had swallowed a frog. He wouldn't look at me. They told me it was budget cuts. Said it like it was weather. We're restructuring, they said. This was a difficult decision, they said. We truly value your contribution, they said. While sliding a manila envelope across the table like a check at a cheap diner, I didn't say a word. I just stared at the logo on the glass wall behind them, the same one I drew the first draft of on a napkin after pulling an all-nighter back in year 1. I wondered if they remembered that. I wondered if they remembered that I hired the guy who hired the guy who hired them. I wondered if they knew that the system they were now using to run their precious budget projections was coded by me, line by line, back when we couldn't afford third-party tools. I wondered if they knew how many client relationships lived on my phone, not in the CRM. But you know what? That wasn't the moment I got angry. That came later. The moment I got angry was when the HR rep tried to hand me a pamphlet titled Embracing New Beginnings. That's when I realized they didn't just want to let me go. They wanted to erase me, as if I'd never existed. As if my fingerprints weren't all over every piece of this company. And that's when it hit me. They weren't just firing me, they were making a mistake. A huge one. Because while they were busy calculating budgets and trimming departments like dead leaves, they forgot one thing: I was the roots. I knew everything, every system, every workaround, every flaw in the infrastructure. And more importantly, I knew the truth. I knew where the bodies were buried. Figuratively speaking, of course. Mostly. I walked out of that room without touching the envelope. I didn't even open it. I didn't need to. Because in that moment, I made a decision. I wouldn't fight them with lawyers or LinkedIn posts. Know Me revenge would be quieter, smarter, and far more effective. You see, when you build something from the ground up, you don't need to burn it down to make a point. You just need to quietly remove the parts that no one else understands. And then watch. Because something very specific happens when the foundation cracks and they never see it coming. And they didn't know it yet, but they had just fired the only person keeping their empire standing. And I was just getting started. I didn't make a scene. That's what confused them the most. No shouting, no threats, no emails at 2 a.m. calling out hypocrisy. I just packed my things, my nameplate, a coffee mug with the company's first logo, the hard drive I had bought with my own money, and walked out. Calm, cold, focused, because I had already begun making a mental checklist the moment they said budget cuts. First thing I did, call Roger. Roger ran our largest client account. I brought him in 8 years ago after saving his previous company from a public PR disaster. We were more than business partners, we were friends. When I told him I was leaving, he didn't even ask why. He just said, "Wherever you go next, I'm in." That's how I knew I still held leverage. Next was the systems audit. See, when you're the one who builds the internal tools from scratch, you know the fragile spots. I didn't sabotage anything, don't get me wrong. I'm not that kind of person. But I did start quietly revoking my access keys, one by one. Because guess what? The backup servers were still registered under my private cloud credentials. And the automation scripts for client reporting still routed through my personal dev account. No one ever updated the ownership because, well, why would they? I had always been there. Until now. 3 days after I left, I started getting the emails. First from Tom in accounting. Hey, did you change something in the invoice system? The dashboards aren't updating. Then from Carla in marketing. Our client funnel metrics are frozen, can you check your side? I didn't respond, I simply smiled and waited. And then came the first domino. Roger pulled out. He didn't just take his business, he told 3 other partners to do the same. Why? Loyalty, trust. The human kind of value that budget spreadsheets can't calculate. The company started scrambling. I knew the signs. Emergency all-hands meetings, urgent Slack channels created with names like Ops, Fire Drill, or Client Retention Now. The CTO who once sat across from me and said I was no longer strategically aligned started reposting job listings for DevOps specialists. But no one they hired knew how to untangle what I'd built. Because I didn't just code, I curated. I layered years of logic into those systems logic that only made sense if you lived through the company's evolution, not just read the manuals. Manuals I wrote and then deleted. Not maliciously, just never got around to finishing them. Too busy keeping the company afloat. Meanwhile, I was working on my next move, quietly, elegantly. I launched my own consulting firm. Small, lean, selective, just me, a laptop, and a reputation. And the thing about reputations, they travel faster than job titles. Within 2 months, I had 5 clients. 3 of them used to be theirs. I didn't steal anyone. I simply answered the phone when people called, asking what happened and whether I was available. Turns out, when the heart of an organization stops beating, people notice. But the most satisfying moment came 3 months in. I received a LinkedIn message from the CEO himself. Short, desperate. Hey, just wondering if we could hop on a quick call. Would love to reconnect and maybe get your input on a few things. I didn't reply. I left him on red. Not out of spite, but because by then I realized something powerful. They didn't just fire me, they freed me. All those years of grinding, fixing, saving, staying silent, while others took credit gone. And now I was building something new, something clean. No politics, no budget cuts. Just value, trust, and freedom. And I was doing it on my terms. But still every now and then, I check their website. I see the cracks, the glitches, the jobs they can't fill, the partnerships they lost. They still use the logo I designed, but now it looks hollow, like a shell of something that once had a soul. And I smile, not because I destroyed them, but because they destroyed themselves the moment they forgot who built them. People ask me now if I'd ever go back if they offered me some kind of high-paying role, or begged me to consult, or handed me an apology behind closed doors. The answer is no. Not because I'm bitter, but because once you see behind the curtain, once you watch people throw away loyalty for convenience, you can't unsee it. I gave them everything, not because I had to, but because I wanted to. I believed in what we were building. I believed in the people. I believed in the mission. But belief without respect is exploitation. And once I realized that, I couldn't go back. Not even for a blank check. My new life, it's quieter, calmer. But every hour I work is mine. Every client I serve respects me. Every decision I make belongs to me. And you know what's funny? I'm making more now than I ever did there. Not just financially, but in meaning, in purpose, in peace. You don't realize how heavy a place becomes until you leave it behind. You don't realize how much of yourself you gave away until you begin to reclaim it. I used to think I had to stay. That loyalty meant permanence. That to leave would be betrayal. But the real betrayal was staying too long in a place that stopped seeing my worth. And maybe that's the part they never understood. That while they were trimming budgets, I was quietly reclaiming my value. They fired me thinking they were cutting costs. But what they really did was lose their cornerstone. And maybe that's the lesson for anyone listening who's ever been laid off, replaced, blindsided, or pushed aside after years of giving their all. You were never just a number. You were never just an employee. You were someone who cared, someone who carried more than your title. And even if they never say thank, you know this. You mattered. You mattered in ways they won't realize until it's too late, until the walls start to crack, until the calls stop coming, until the culture collapses under the weight of its own short-sightedness. And when that happens, you won't need revenge. You won't need to gloat. You'll be too busy building something better, something yours. I used to think I lost everything that day. But the truth? That meeting in the conference room wasn't the end. It was the beginning. The beginning of a life I didn't know I was allowed to have. A life where I don't have to prove my value to people who've already forgotten it. A life where I get to choose who I build with and who I walk away from. So if you're in that place right now, if you're standing at the edge of uncertainty, clutching a severance letter, or staring down silence where your purpose used to be hear this, you are not done. You are not broken. You are not worthless. You are free. And freedom, once you taste it, changes everything. It's not always easy, it's not always glamorous, but it is always honest. And after 18 years of carrying someone else's dream, honesty tastes like peace, like home, like mine.